I think that willingness to be vulnerable, nobody expects you to be a technology expert nowadays. It's too complex. And even if you're an expert in one area, there are other areas that you're going to be completely blind to. So nobody can be a financial expert in everything. Nobody can be a technology expert in everything. So don't expect that that's what people expect from you. So be vulnerable, be willing to go out there, take a look at what's available and educate yourself and find people that you can learn with.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. David Hartley, partner in charge of advisory at Anders CPAs, and Anders possesses a unique blend of technical expertise and over 3 decades of CPA proficiency. With a background in C-suite leadership and consulting for privately held enterprises, he specializes in facilitating the growth of middle market businesses with a particular focus on innovation and technology. In his current role, Dave is leading the transformation of Anders into the CPA firm of the future, overseeing the advisory practice strategic direction and driving growth. His prior experience as a chief information officer, CIO, equips him to employ technology innovatively, enhancing business success. Dave regularly shares his valuable insights on platforms like LinkedIn, at industry conferences, and in popular publications. You can benefit from Dave's wealth of experience and forward-thinking approach, using his expertise to navigate the intersection of technology and accounting to drive growth and innovation in your business. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Candy. It's great to be here. Hopefully I can live up to that intro.
Well, that's a little bit of a background on yourself, but I would love for you to just share a little bit more about your story of how you became an entrepreneur.
Sure. Yeah. So it's interesting. Even though I became a CPA, kind of my end goal was always to become an entrepreneur and own my own business. And now being a partner in a firm, I have the ability to do that. So I actually started in college. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I had a very wise friend that told me, Dave, you don't need to be an accountant, but you need to study accounting. And it's the language of business. And wherever you go, you need to understand that the basic financial, how the system works and what the rules are and those types of things. So I took that advice, went into accounting, studied, passed the CPA exam, and did public accounting for a while. And then, as you mentioned in the intro, I pivoted completely to technology. So I pivoted completely out of the CPA world, led technology for a public company, and then I came back to the CPA world. So I think part of that has helped me become a great advisor for clients because I've actually been on the other side of the table and I know how hard it is to run a business. And so, so then that gave me the opportunity at Anders ultimately to be, a partner, and along with my partners, really drive the future of the firm. So my focus right now is advisory services, which is really, you've got the traditional audit and tax services that you would expect from a CPA firm, but all the other services that add a lot of value, whether it's our virtual CFO service or technology or whatever, kind of all of those things. So that passion kind of led me to be an entrepreneur, an owner, and then ultimately, grow the firm and see what value we can create for our clients and for our employees.
Nice. Well, we are going to kind of meld together the different things of your experience, to share tips, and tricks with those who are listening. Because again, my goal is really help entrepreneurs be successful by giving them information that maybe they didn't have already because too many businesses are failing or struggling. So my first question for you really is, how can those who are listening to this transform their firms to adapt to the rapidly evolving business landscape? And what key strategies or approaches should they consider in this transformation?
Got it. Yeah. And there's a lot in that question. But when I think about, things are changing. And so, there's a lot of debate now with AI and its impact on both businesses and the CPA profession, kind of what that's going to look like in the future. And I think, kind of the core answer is that the future is going to look very different than the past. And I think if you're not, kind of one recommendation would be, you've got to get educated on these things. You've got to understand what's coming. And as a result of that, whether I know a lot of people, like there's been a lot about ChatGPT and a lot of things that people have heard, but a lot of people have not invested the time. When you look at the statistics of how many people actually use ChatGPT, you have a whole bunch of people who use it a whole lot, but then you've got a massive amount of people who've heard about it, but have never actually used it. And I think that's the kind of thing that if I'm a small business owner, you have to experiment and educate yourself to learn what's coming. And I do think technology is going to be a massive change. As you mentioned in the intro, I've been in the profession now for over 3 decades. When I look at the next 10 years, there's probably going to be more change in that 10 years than I've experienced in the last 30 years. So for that, I think that, business is becoming more complex. You need to have good advisors. You need to be educating yourself. You need to be trying new things. And those are all kind of the cornerstone of, I think, small businesses, the ones that are going to thrive versus the ones that are going to struggle. If you keep doing the things the same way you've always done them, somebody's going to figure out a better way to do them that's going to be a lot more efficient and a lot more effective. And if you're not part of that group, then suddenly you're going to be at a huge disadvantage.
Well, I know some people are afraid of technology, some are afraid it's going to take their job, or just different things. I do know also I had been watching, some of the articles and some of the things that people were testing with ChatGPT. And I know that it's not perfect, obviously, yet too. There's still a lot of false information that it's providing or not doing everything accurately. But it is a good tool to be able to use in certain areas, and it will continue to improve over time, I'm sure, as they, keep tweaking it and doing different things too. So, I mean, what would you say to someone though who's afraid maybe of using the technology? Like, how can they use it effectively, for things in their business, yet not be so worried that it's going to kind of take over?
Yeah, it's and just part of how I view these technologies is it's like I've got a room of interns over here, and I've got like 6 interns ready to help me with whatever I need help with. And I turn to it and I ask it a question. And basically then I think of it as these interns going off, gathering information and bringing it back. And it's not going to be, so when they do, what would you expect from interns? Well, it's not going to be perfect. It'll be a lot of really good work, but they don't have the experience to really, or the insight. So when that information comes forward with ChatGPT, I'm always like, okay, that's great. That's a great start. But what about this? You didn't think about that. You didn't consider this. And then the intern goes off, refines it, and then brings it back. And so I think that, as part of that education, I think you have to find what works for you. Some people just like reading about these technologies. Other people like find a few people online that are, influencers in the area that you're interested in, and you're comfortable with them in terms of the types of information they're sharing. I think that can be significant to move people along. But I think at the end of the day, I do think, there is the debate, will it take jobs? Will it do whatever? Well, I think if it's making people more efficient, then I think ultimately it is going to have an impact on our labor market, because there's going to be less work that needs to be done because the technology is going to do part of it. However, I would encourage anyone listening that, and I was on an AI panel about 6 months ago now. And, I'm looking at these statistics, trying to figure out how big of an impact is it going to have. So in my mind, I'm thinking if I can be 5% more productive, 10% more productive, well, then I had clients that I was talking to that they're like, hey, our developers are now 50% more productive. And, we're using it for this. It is saving us X amount of hours. And that made me, kind of step back. And then I was on this panel, and I was on with a couple of educators, and they had more time to play with these technologies than I had at that time. So I was interested in their perspective. And they said, well, give me one person with the tool versus 2 people without the tool. I was like, okay, that's significant. And then the next person went and said, give me one person with the technology versus 3 people without the technology. And I think that's the kind of force multiplier that we're talking about, which is the people that really figure out how to do this. There's massive opportunity for efficiencies there. The other thing that's exciting about this is the things that it's going to do for you are likely the things you don't enjoy doing anyway. And so it's like, think about suddenly, if you do a 40-hour work week, and suddenly you think about, well, what if I could get that same amount of work done in 32 hours? How would I use that additional 8 hours? Would I take a day off? Would I use that instead to tackle all of the things that are on my to-do list that I'd love to do, but I never have time to get to? That's the idea, is not that. So I wouldn't focus so much on the job elimination part. I would focus more on the opportunity to think about you as an individual having the things that you don't really like to do done. And then you've got free time. Are you going to spend that for leisure? Are you going to spend that on other things you never have a chance to get to? That, when I think about being a small business owner and how hard and difficult that is, that to me is probably the most exciting aspect.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know too, we have had businesses struggling over, the last few years, and things are, turning a corner for many of them, where some things were cut back in, 2020, 2021. Finally, things are improving. And so businesses are now looking at growth again, right? Not just survival, but, we want to continue growing, offering new services, finding another market, for the same services. So do you have maybe some growth strategies that you could share with those who are listening to help them, not grow too fast either? Because we do know sometimes if you grow too fast, that causes even more problems. But how do they manage the growth, but also plan for it, financially, or if they're selling products and services, planning to have enough of all of that? What would you say about that?
And I think, given my background as a CPA, one of the things, and this is really part of our virtual CFO service that we really focus on, which is where small businesses get in trouble with overexpanding or not understanding what's happening is with cash. So cash flow forecasting is absolutely essential, because if you're going to add a new location, if you're going to add a new service or product, you're going to make an investment. If you don't understand the cash flow implications of that, and then as part of that, having cash flow forecasts so you can see what's coming, when bills are due, if we make this investment, how's it going to be paid for over time? Really understanding those cash flows is fundamental to business success. So I think that, when you think about that offering, that's really a key part of it. And if you don't have somebody, if that doesn't come naturally to you, then find somebody who can help you with that. Because we have way too many small business owners who really don't have that visibility. And in some ways, they cross their fingers and hope that, well, if I work really hard, everything will work out in the end. What we find is that when we have those conversations and we focus on cash flow forecasting, and we also focus on profits, it's not enough to generate revenue. It's really about what's left at the end of the day.
Right.
And if you don't have somebody looking at that over your shoulder and saying, why are you making this investment versus over here? This service line has a massive return versus what you're getting over here. If you don't have somebody that can be your coach in that area, that's one thing I would highly recommend. Somebody that can help you with cash flow forecasting, help you understand and look at these complex business decisions, because this world is becoming increasingly complex. So when you do that, you need somebody who can help you sort through that and help you make tough business decisions based on financial data as opposed to hope.
Right. Or saying like, well, I know I have information in my head. I know there's money in the bank, or I know, but not really looking at the numbers. And I'm glad that you touched on even like the revenue portion, because I do know a lot of people are looking at that top line and looking at like, I want to grow my revenue, not understanding the concept necessarily of the net profit. And that's really more important, right? Because you can have revenue, but have a loss, right? You could grow your company top line, but be losing money, and they're not always aware of that. So, do you want to even touch on the difference between, cash flow and profit? Because I know there's a lot of confusion around that as well.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, I think every small business owner needs to be thinking about their exit. And at the end of the day, your business, it can't be dependent on a single individual. You have to figure out how to make that transition as you evolve and mature your business. So you've got to make those investments in systems and processes and those types of things. But at the end of the day, you have to make your business very attractive for someone. And this may not be for 5, 10, 20 years. You may transition it to a family member. But if you're not thinking about profit and ultimately what's left, because most deals are done, sometimes there's a metric based on revenue, but a lot of times it's a multiple of EBITDA. So your business is going to be valued based on how much profit you produce. And different factors will influence that. You could get an EBITDA multiple of 8 or 10 or 12. Or if you're poorly managed and you're not really growing, then people are going to say, it's probably more like 4 or 6 is your multiple for EBITDA. So basically your profits are going to start driving the ultimate value of your business when you decide to exit. So that's one of the reasons why it's very important to understand that. And a lot of times it is like if you're managing off of bank statements, and at the end of the month, is there money in the bank? That's good, but that's dangerous because you're not
Right.
necessarily seeing what's coming. And if you're not really focused on profit as part of that, and you don't have KPIs, you don't have somebody that's helping you with that can help you focus on how to maximize the profits of your business. Because generally what we find is that there are 2 or 3 levers, whether it's something in inventory or something in AR. There are things that you can do that can positively impact your profit. But if you're just doing what you've always done, and you're not, and that's another thing that I think is very advantageous, is to get relationships with other people in the industry, get relationships with other small business owners. What are you doing? What are you doing? You'll get some ideas that, ultimately, if you get those implemented successfully, can increase your profitability. And then ultimately, when it does come time to exit, you'll be a much more attractive business, and you'll get more money for all the hard work that you've put into building your small business.
Right. And while you were talking there too, you mentioned a couple terms that someone may not understand who's listening. So I would love for you to just give the definition of EBITDA and KPI.
Yeah. So let's start with KPIs. So key performance indicators, those are ultimately the things that if you only manage 3 things, what are the 3 KPIs? And these are generally future focused in terms of, like, for me in my business, I want to make sure that our pipeline of work coming in is solid. And so for me, that's a huge indicator. What does our pipeline show? Is it trending up? Is it trending down? So that for me is a very important KPI. And so there are 4 or 5 things that I manage in my business, but that's what you need to identify in yours, which are what are the things that ultimately, if you monitor those and really focus on success and those KPIs, ultimately it'll be success for your business is what that will mean. So KPIs, if you're not managing by KPIs, if you haven't really identified those and focused on what are the true drivers of your business, I would recommend taking a look at that. So EBITDA, which is the other term that I use, is really a proxy for cash flow. So it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. So it's basically a proxy for cash flow. So you take your earnings, strip out sort of the non-cash things, and then EBITDA is a lot of what people will look at in terms of the true number for the cash flows of your business, which hopefully will extend in the future. And then therefore, based on those multiples, that's kind of how your business is valued in terms of the value that you've created. So KPIs and EBITDA are a couple of fundamental terms that it's important to know as a small business owner.
Well, I know sometimes too, talking about, having the depreciation or amortization and having those deductions, which are non-cash, deductions, sometimes confuses people too. And like, why do my numbers not make sense? Like, it doesn't make sense that my bank account is different than my profit and loss, and, not understanding like a balance sheet total is a carryover from the beginning of time, and profit and loss is a certain, period of time that you're looking at too. Do you want to just touch on a little bit about understanding financials? What are the key things maybe to understand about each one of those that will help them, especially if they're not looking at them now because they feel overwhelmed, maybe give them a little bit more of an understanding?
Yeah. So your basic financial statements, you've got the balance sheet, as you mentioned, you've got the profit and loss, which is often referred to as a P&L, and then you've got a statement of cash flows. And those 3 things are kind of the core accounting documents that you need to have. So your balance sheet is important because there are things that you will identify over time. And there's a lot of kind of the extension of KPIs is on your balance sheet, there's a lot of ratios that you can look at that will also tell you the health of your business. So that's an important thing to look at on your balance sheet. On your P&L, your profit and loss statement, as you mentioned, that's for a period of time. So generally you look at the month or the quarter or the year, and then you do comparisons year over year to help you identify trends. What's working? What did we think would be working? And then third is your statement of cash flows, which is really your inflows and outflows of your business. So specifically, on the P&L, that is really what I focus on for the most part, because that tells me in terms of what's coming in, am I doing a good job managing my expenses? Are there places that I'm spending more money that I didn't, plan on spending? Which is why the important part of that is separate from those three financial statements, but it's cash flow forecasting. A lot of times your financial statements are the past. It's how did we do? When you start getting into cash flow forecasting, that's when you're influencing what the future should look like. And then you can compare. So if you thought the third quarter was going to look like this in your cash flow forecast, and then as you get financial statements, you look at it and you do a comparison, it's like, that didn't work. I've got a variance. Why did that variance happen? Peeling into those things and really understanding, I thought we were doing this, but the reality is we did this. Why? And that's how you make your business better, is to identify, wow, that sales push that we did in the third quarter, that was great for top line, but man, we lost a ton of money on that. And then that gives you better insights to better run your business. So I think an important thing of this, if this doesn't come naturally to you, you need to find someone who can help you with that. So historically, kind of bookkeeping, accounting, a lot of that has just been focused on delivering the financial statements. I think the future is, and what we see a lot of accounting professionals, virtual CFOs going towards, is really towards understanding, helping people understand what this means. Because most people, candidly, are not financial people. And so therefore, when they get their financial statements, they don't spend time to review them. They don't spend time to get into them because they don't understand them. So what you need is basically a financial coach who, when you get your financial statements or when you prepare your cash flow forecast, can sit down and have a conversation with you and help you understand, hey, did you notice this? Did you look at this trend? Do you understand that? Do you know why that's happening? I'm not in your business day to day, but here's what I'm seeing in the numbers. Help me understand what that means. And then once you understand that, then it's like, well, probably if we did these three things, that would probably positively impact that. So next quarter, let's try this one out of those three. That's what a true future focused accountant or bookkeeper is going to be able to help you with, is to understand what's going on. And then how do you change the outcome in the future? How do you make it better? And I think that's what we're hearing from our clients that they want more of, is that's great that you can tell me what happened. I want you to positively impact my future.
Right. Well, and I always like to talk with people about, how they're saving some money, for those unforeseen circumstances too. There's always something that, can pop up that you didn't know, it's going to have to replace a piece of equipment or something like that too. So do you want to just touch on maybe a little bit of the planning around some of that savings? So not just what money is coming in or out, but maybe what you should be putting away for those rainy day situations that might come up?
Yeah. And I think that is very important, because where we see small businesses get into trouble is because they didn't consider those two things. So the two big things that would be, you've got to have, whether it's 6 months of, sort of profits set aside for unexpected expenses, because things are going to happen. And whenever I advise people and they're starting a business, I'm like, okay, that's a great plan, but what happens when something goes south? You'll have a customer that doesn't pay on time. You'll have a customer that doesn't pay at all. You'll have a project that gets canceled. You'll have interest rates change. Kind of all of those things could happen. How would you deal with that? And really stress testing, your scenarios. If you don't have that money set aside, that's where you get into trouble, because suddenly you didn't consider that scenario and it becomes a problem. So that's really important. The other things is you've got to have a good handle on taxes, and you have to be setting money aside as you go throughout the year. Because what happens at the end of the year, obviously, if you don't have the cash available to pay your taxes, the government does not care. So you will have to pay your taxes, and you are going to have to figure out how to pay them. So a lot of times then that's when you get into unfavorable lending relationships. You get costs of capital that are really, really high because you didn't plan for it appropriately. And that's where we see a lot of businesses get overstretched, is because they don't understand cash flow. They don't understand the implications of some of the decisions that they're making. And it's not necessarily that risk is bad and that you shouldn't open that new location or you shouldn't launch that new service line. But you just need to understand, if you invest and you launch that service line and customers don't want it, how do you handle that? What are the things that you do? So setting money aside as you go is critical and essential. And one of the things, we actually publish quite a bit of thought leadership on these types of topics as it relates to cash flow, things as part of our virtual CFO practice, where we publish guides basically for helping people understand and actually going through some of these cash flow materials. So all of those things are available through our website, which is anderscpa.com. And then also I post about a lot of those types of things on my LinkedIn. And then also Summit Virtual CFO by Anders is on LinkedIn, and that's really our virtual CFO practice. And they publish a lot of great ideas and content. So if you connect with me on social media, Anders CPA or Summit Virtual CFO by Anders, those are all great sources of education that are specifically written for small business owners, mid-sized business owners to understand and process some of these complexities.
Perfect. Well, I always do ask, if you have a way you want people to reach out and connect with you. So I'm glad that you did share that information too. Along those lines, would you have an offer that you would like to share with the listeners, and then they can, follow up with you on that as well? I mean, I know you just gave some resources, but I don't know if you have anything else that you would like to share.
Yeah, I think in general, that the thought leadership that we produce, I think, is incredibly valuable, and we get a lot of positive feedback from prospects and clients about using that. I think just in terms of an offer, if you go to Summit Virtual CFO by Anders, if you Google that and go there, it will explain these services to you. And so you can understand and decide what might be valuable for your business, and does this make sense? At the very least, you'll learn what the services are, because a lot of people, like our virtual CFO business, which is really focused on cash flow forecasting and driving better business decisions, a lot of small and mid-sized business owners don't even know that exists. They think about the cost of hiring a CFO and they're like, that's more than I can take on. That makes sense. So that's why we have this. It's a more virtual offering, and it's perfectly suited for businesses, say, in the 3 to 20 million in annual revenue space. One of the great things about that, when you go on and look at those services, you'll get educated on that. But there's also a pricing calculator. So you can put in basically the aspects of your business, and then you'll get a quote based on, what that would look like. And then if that's something you're interested in, you submit an interest, we'll get in touch with you, and then we can figure out if this is a good fit for you or not. But I think at the end of the day, really getting educated and not being fearful of the financial side or the technology side, I think that's a core thing for small to mid-sized business owners to do, is get over that fear. And I think also as I get older and get more experience in the profession, I realize that one of my greatest strengths is tapping into our younger professionals, because the less experienced professionals, they solve problems very different than me. And they look at things differently, and they use different tools than I use. And I think that's the kind of thing where you have to embrace this. And it's okay that you don't know every technology. I consider myself a technology guy, and there are things I would love to get into and look at, but I just don't have the time. So for me, I have no problem raising my hand and saying, hey, that's great that you know how to write in Python, or you know how to use Power BI and do this. I don't. Help me understand what that is. Why did you choose to use that tool? What does it do that I don't understand? I think that willingness to be vulnerable, nobody expects you to be a technology expert nowadays. It's too complex. And even if you're an expert in one area, there are other areas that you're going to be completely blind to. So nobody can be a financial expert in everything. Nobody can be a technology expert in everything. So don't expect that that's what people expect from you. So be vulnerable, be willing to go out there, take a look at what's available, and educate yourself and find people that you can learn with.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, David, for sharing your wisdom. I know you had a lot of information that you shared that will be helpful for our listeners. So I really appreciate your time to chat with me today and, have this discussion.
Yeah, very good. And I would encourage your listeners, connect with me on LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/Dave Hartley, DaveHartley. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I share a lot of materials, these types of topics. I talk about remote work, hybrid work. I talk about AI and the impact of technology, and just a lot of things that I see that I think could be very valuable to your listeners. So it's been great to be here.
Well, wonderful. I'm so glad that you were here, and thank you for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.